David Tannenberg was arguably the most important instrument maker in 18th century America, but the full range of his work is unknown. This talk summarizes new discoveries, but first, some background. Tannenberg was born in 1728 in a Moravian church settlement near Dresden, Saxony. Trained as a woodworker, he came to Pennsylvania at age 21 to help build the Moravian community of Bethlehem. In 1757, Bethlehem's overseers assigned him to work with the elderly organ builder Johann Gottlob Klemm, another Saxon immigrant. Together, they produced several small instruments for use in Bethlehem and nearby Nazareth. After Klemm died in 1762, Tannenberg took over Klemm's workshop and tools. 3 years later, he moved to Lidditz, another Moravian settlement about 75 miles west of Philadelphia. There, with a string of assistants, he built more than 40 organs for clients up and down the mid-Atlantic coast. Lewis Miller showed him here with an assistant, installing his last organ at Christ Lutheran Church in York, Pennsylvania. He died on this job in 1804. Tannenberg's organ for Philadelphia's Zion Lutheran Church, completed in 1790, was said then to be the largest in the United States, with 3 manuals and 34 stops. It added greatly to his reputation, but it burned with the church 4 years later. But his organ for Home Moravian Church in Salem, North Carolina, completed in 1800, remains in regular use. Its gentle sounds led someone to describe it aptly as a clavichord with pipes. Tannenberg's 9 extant organs represent a distinctive Pennsylvania German style that still influences new construction, including an organ being built now for the Moravian Church in Herrnhut, Germany. Also still influential are Tannenberg's technical drawing and written instructions for making a clavichord. His quarter-scale plan specifies case dimensions and string lengths using English feet and inches, and each key bears its pitch letter in Tannenberg's handwriting. Here's the first page of his instructions. No actual clavichord by Tannenberg was known before 2004, when I identified this one now in the Moravian Historical Society in Nazareth. It differs from the drawing, for example, by adding 2 keys in the treble, and its design seems experimental. Tannenberg made this clavichord in 1761, in the midst of the French and Indian War, while he was still under Klemm's tutelage and not allowed to work on his own. It's the earliest known American clavichord, and Tannenberg's only extant signed and dated work. He labeled it out of sight under the soundboard. That's why it escaped earlier identification. The hidden label skirted Moravian rules against prideful display, and it surreptitiously declared Tannenberg's independence of his overseer's control of every aspect of communal life. They reprimanded Tannenberg, for example, for ostentatious clothing, for growing fruit without authorization, and pledging allegiance to the United States in defiance of the congregation's neutrality. Among the clavichord's quirks are a sound post connecting the soundboard to a resonant bottom board, which is raised by surrounding molding above the tabletop beneath. Tannenberg probably adopted the sound post from the violin, which he played in the Lidditz Collegium Musicum. Also surprising, the soundboard has a low, flat-topped, double-pinned bridge which holds the strings securely while minimizing downward pressure, allowing the soundboard to vibrate more freely. I don't know of an earlier example of such a bridge, which became standard later on pianos. I'm sorry I haven't been able to get back to Nazareth to take better photos. The clavichord's novelty foreshadows forward-looking aspects of Tannenberg's organs. These include his early adoption of equal temperament and of logarithmic pipe scaling, both advocated by the Thuringian theorist Georg Andreas Sorge, whose treatise was in Tannenberg's hands. All in all, Tannenberg comes across as a headstrong nonconformist, rooted in German Baroque practices, but charting his own ambitious course in Pennsylvania's back country. Archival sources show that Tannenberg made other unspecified types of claviers, but none was known until recently. 3 years ago, Willard Martin showed me an anonymous bent-side spinet owned by an elderly lady from Lebanon, Pennsylvania, about 14 miles from Lidditz. Her father, the late Charles Henry Jr., had bought it from a local antiques dealer around 1950 as an elegant piece of mahogany furniture, supposedly German. The dealer said he'd gotten the spinet nearby, but he never connected it to Lidditz. After Charles Henry died, his family lent the spinet for display at the Lebanon County Historical Society. Believing it was German, and thus irrelevant to their collections, the society eventually returned it to the family. After its return, again thanks to Willard Martin, Charles Henry's daughter lent me the spinet for study. Happily, she's now given it to the Moravian Historical Society. There, it joins Tannenberg's 1761 clavichord, an organ he built in 1776, and a Baroque upright piano that John Watson attributes to Johann Clem. These 4 instruments are milestones in American music history. During my study, I turned up 2 other anonymous spinets, clearly from the same workshop. One of these, acquired earlier in the 20th century by Henry Ford, burned in a fire at the Henry Ford Museum in 1970. It's known today only from a couple of photos. The other descended in the family of Henry Wilhelm Stiegel, a prominent colonial iron and glass manufacturer who lived near Lidditz. In the late 19th century, the Stiegel spinet, shown here, passed to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, the source of this photo. The Historical Society eventually gave it to the now defunct Philadelphia History Museum, and today it sits in a warehouse awaiting transfer to Drexel University. I examined it in the warehouse for just long enough to establish its clear connection to the other spinets. All 3 must have come from Tannenberg's workshop, likely late in his career. This is confirmed by features shared only with Tannenberg's organs. These include their peculiar key front moldings and other details of their keys, notably a characteristic outward scoop between the lines scored across the ebony natural key tops. Also, they bear his handwriting on keys and jacks, naming their pitches just as he wrote them in organs and on his clavichord plan. Moreover, Tannenberg's posthumous workshop inventory lists everything needed for spinet construction, including large hinges like this, specifically designated for spinets. Such instruments would have been old-fashioned by 1790, when square pianos were all the rage. But spinets still appealed to conservative taste. They're also lighter in weight and required less maintenance than pianos. And as we'll see, Tannenberg increased their musical versatility. I don't maintain that Tannenberg made every part of these spinets himself. He surely had help in sawing lumber and assembling the cases. Mahogany, by the way, is notoriously hard to bend without kerfing, as was done here. The joinery is expert, notably the spine's difficult pegged corner joints. But certain inconsistencies, for example, in the irregular lengths of jack tongues, show freehand work rather than reliance on jigs that would ensure uniformity. The workmanship is precise only where Tannenberg thought it mattered, as in placement of hundreds of tiny pins that define string lengths and angles, and in the close fitting of tongues to jacks and jacks to their registers. The 3 spinets look much alike, unpretentious like all Moravian furniture, but they differ substantially, showing they were made to order, not from the same plan. All 3 incorporate up-to-date elements, notably a fully chromatic 5-octave range, uncommon before about 1780. But the Henry and Stiegel Spinets range from F to F, while the Ford museums go from G to G. All three have a muting device, like those in contemporary English square pianos. No other spinet known to me has such a mute, which slides diagonally upward against the strings in front of the nut to give a lute-like tone. In Stiegel's spinet, a hand lever shifts the mute batten, while in the other two, the mute is operated by a pedal attached to the front left leg. I've not seen another spinet with an original pedal. I guess Tannenberg took the idea from English harpsichords or pianos. Among other differences, the Henry spinet's traditional stand is bolted together and disassembles for transport, but the other two stands fold up in a clever way not observed elsewhere, with their front and back legs connected by a broad, pivoting stretcher. Stiegel's stretcher, shown here in an 1885 drawing, has a whimsical, wavy outline. Also distinctive are the matching shapes of the Henry and Stiegel jackrail brackets, here the bass end, and the profiles of their keyboard end blocks. The keyboards balance on a continuous chord fulcrum that passes straight in front of the rows of balance pins and is snugly tied to them by a zigzag thread, an attachment system not seen elsewhere. Also unique to these keyboards are thin horizontal slits cut into the ends of the keys to make them springy. The Henry keys have single slits, Stiegel's have two. The flexibility these slits impart to the key tails may lessen the jack's impact against the padded overrail and accelerate the key's return. Both extant spinets have flat, double-pinned bridges, like the one in Tannenberg's clavichord. Not surprisingly, considering Tannenberg's circumstances, he conflated German traits with British. His exquisitely finished keyboards, for example, look quaintly Germanic. By this time, English keyboards favored plain ivory naturals and simpler keyfront molding. Tannenberg used German pitched letters, but measured in English inches. His jacks look typically British, with brass staples limiting the tongue's recoil. The Henry spinet's jacks have leather plectra topped with a layer of thin white skin, also a British characteristic. West Indian mahogany, of course, was much more common in British and American furniture than in German. Along with the blacksmith who forged the iron pedals, Tannenberg must have relied on a turner for the stand's graceful baluster legs, since his own tools didn't include a lathe. Thus, these instruments represent collaborative effort, including local suppliers of raw materials, lumber, leather, glue, cloth, and so on. The Henry spinet's lovely, sand-cast, hand-filed hinges surely came from England, and the iron and brass music wire from Germany. Mahogany, ebony, and ivory arrived through colonial trade networks via importers in New York and Philadelphia. No contemporary backcountry Philadelphia or Pennsylvania furnishings incorporated more diverse materials and involved more painstaking labor than these custom-made spinets. They must have been costly, if less expensive than high-style square pianos from Philadelphia, New York, or London. By buying from an American maker, thrifty customers avoided import tariffs, and Tannenberg's reputation guaranteed his product's quality. To conclude, though his workshop was situated in a provincial religious settlement of just a few hundred people, Tannenberg maintained close ties to the outside world and engaged with its developments. These three spinets reveal a previously obscure aspect of his 4-decade-long career. They're remarkable for their quality and sophistication, for the imagination they embody, and their origin, within an evangelical community who regarded Tannenberg's work as essential to their mission. Thank you.